All right. So first, let me welcome everybody to Knox Unplugged. Knox Unplugged is a podcast that goes on. Well, you do it once a week. We've been doing it for a little over a year now. Jason, is that about right? A little over a year.
A little over a year.
Yeah. And so you can find it on the Fight Laugh Feast app. That's actually, it's called Pub now, Pub TV. You can find it on your app store. Download it. We just updated everything inside the Fight Laugh Feast app. It is a whole new app, a whole new feel, new shows coming out. We are doing TV shows now. Gabe has a show called This America. If you go to the app now, you can download the app and watch the trailer. And so Knox Unplugged, you can find it there as well. All our shows are on your podcast stream as well. But go to the app, download the app so we can have direct connection. So, hey, what's up? Chris Brown's here. What's up, Chris? Michael Sellers is here. And Caleb, what's up, man? Everybody hit the share button. I can't tell you. So I just want to say this real quick. The share button is probably, man, the most powerful button on the internet. The share and the like button. Comments are huge too. But when you are sharing content, when you are pushing content, it's amazing. I watch these guys who cut yards. Have you seen these guys, Jason? Where they'll cut yards and they'll film. They'll go out once.
Oh yeah, yeah, like an old yard that hasn't been taken care of in a long time.
Exactly, and they'll go out there to this yard and they'll cut it and they'll film it and they'll put it on their social media and then they'll just like a short. But then people love to see these, and so they like them and they're sharing. They'll have like 3-4 million views on them. These guys make money, almost as much money from cutting yards as they do from just filming. Yeah. And it's just because people are watching and hitting the share button.
Well, because it's super satisfying to watch something get gardened.
Well, I think that's part of it. I have another theory. I think that people are lazy and don't want to do work, but yet want the reality of the finished completion of work. And so they like seeing other people do it. And then they're like, oh, this is great. Like we should do that. Nah, let's just keep supporting this guy, which is fine. But it allows this guy to go out and to cut more yards for free because he's given a form of an entertainment engagement. And it's a different kind of economy than we've ever had before where, well, should I say it's the most unique way to have this kind of economy. We have it like in commercials and TV shows, but for a guy to just film himself out there cutting a yard, doing his normal work, and we are so entertained by watching hedges being trimmed and grass being lined that we were willing to share it and like it, and you have to see this. And so it's just people don't understand how important it is to share things, and hitting the share button, promoting something out there that's really good is a blessing to your brothers and sisters. And if you can't join the club, if you can't become a member, if you can't give $10 a month to this, that's okay. Hit the share button, comment on something, like it, engage it. That engagement actually means something too. And so there's just a whole lot of ways than we've ever had before to promote something that we really like. Yes, Caleb, capitalism is amazing. All right, Laura's here. What's up, Laura TV? So Jason, usually we when we do Knox Unplugged, we don't usually have an intro and open. So Lauren Hill's a blessing for us this morning.
Right.
We usually just kind of jump into the conversation. So I want to do that because I've been really excited to have this conversation. We've been going through Spicer's Images of Life with C.S. Lewis.
Yep.
And because you believe that Edmund Spencer is the key to unlocking our ignorance and giving us the way forward, just kind of give a short, brief summary of why you think Edmund Spencer is so important.
Well, because it's the last really great work in English that retains a poetic cohesiveness. Which what it means is that they still believed that the world was all connected, made sense. Mankind had a place for it. You could know your place in the world, and that by embracing your place in the world, in creation, under the Lord Jesus Christ, you could actually find a full, fulfilling life by submitting to the world as you found it. And there's a completely different and new way of understanding the world now, and it's the reason that people feel disconnected. There's a French term called ennui that means the feeling that you don't have a place in the world. Sometimes it's called existential boredom. And so that is the norm now because we don't believe the world actually holds together and makes sense, and so because of that, uh, I think it makes sense to go back to the last time that you had somebody writing as if the world did make full and complete cohesive sense. And it's this long poem uh, about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, where there's a world filled with honor, joy, beauty, the protection of women, and the fighting and killing of monsters, and pageantry, and the joy of a good the joy of a good parade. All of those things that we can't do anymore, or we don't really know what to do with anymore. I think if we can imaginatively learn how to re-enter into the poetry of somebody like an Edmund Spenser and learn what it looks like, feels like, gut level feeling of a world that makes sense, a world that's on purpose, a world that has an eschatos, an end, then and is going someplace, and that we have a spot in the world. If we can do that, then the other parts of our life start to fall into place, and we.
Mm.
So, like for example, we spent the last couple of uh, episodes talking about where does sexuality fit into the world, um, in an older view, right? Before, for us, sexuality tends to be either the way that we find um, find meaning, like by having enough orgasms, or it is the thing that makes us feel the most dislodged from reality. Um, so we spent a couple of weeks talking about the older view of sexuality, where it's not about power, but it's about learning. It's about embracing covenantally your place in creation and helping, be getting to be a part of the overcoming of death through having children. Um, so it, I think that was, yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, no, that was we had to be careful around that one. Just real quick, is your mic set on your earbuds or are they set on your microphone? Just tap your mic.
Oh, I don't know.
Just, yeah, I'm not hearing that.
Let me fix it.
All right. While you're doing that, so tell everybody inside of the spaces, guys, we're gonna get to if you have a question, go ahead and throw your hand up in there in space and I'll be able to bring you in. I don't even know how to do that on here yet. I'm gonna figure it out though. We're gonna figure it out. Um, and I shared a link on Twitter and on YouTube if you want to come in later and have a conversation with us and talk about what we're going to talk about. But I want to get to, is your mic fixed? Did you
I
get?
think so. Is that better?
Oh, there we go. Now,
Yeah, there we go.
so in the middle of this conversation that we've been having, and our conversations on Knox Unplugged usually go forever because I'm really ignorant and need a lot of teaching, and so we usually do about 2 hours. I don't care about anybody else's time for the most part. I'm more concerned about me. It's all about me. But in the middle of this, I got a text from you after a show, and you said, I don't think people understand what all comes with paganism. And it was like, oh, this is interesting because I send you text messages about things that I see going on Twitter. I see like the mobs that are happening out in New York when a guy decides to give away some stuff and the people just go absolutely bonkers and destroy the city. And then we see the Black Lives Matter riots, and then we see just all the violence, kids beating up old men. We see all this stuff, and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening. And then you said it's actually the return of paganism, and people don't know what to expect from paganism. What is it that has caught your eye to say, oh, this is paganism? And then let's talk about how we're defining what paganism is.
Yeah. So the the first thing that actually tipped me off to it was it was an essay from the 40s uh, about the cruise about the world wars, comparing the world wars to the crusades. And
Mm,
right in the middle of it, he talked about how, um, that in ancient paganism, the the identity was derived through tribalism, which was based on what you were not, and so you tattooed your identity onto yourself, and then being a part of the tribe was what gave you your fundamental identity. And so he was talking about how Christendom originally was the thing that um, it it reset the tribes away from their identity and gave them a broader, bigger identity so that they could remain in their tribe. They didn't have the tribes weren't dissolved by Christendom, but the paganism that required rivalry between tribes, and the paganism that required blood to find peace was was uh, uh, undone by Christendom, by the advancement of the gospel. And ever since then, you start to say, oh my gosh, so tribalism, the need for blood, and rivalry are central things to start looking for in order to understand how a cosmology like paganism is presenting itself, where it's identifiable, right? So, um, so if violence against somebody doesn't count, then you're dealing with paganism, right? So because one tribe is, if your tribe are the only ones that are human, the only ones that violence against has to be justified. If
Hmm.
violence against somebody else doesn't have to be justified because they're not really human, then you're dealing with some sort of paganism, because paganism divided humanity up into smaller groups, and your group was the human group that had to be treated according to human rules, and then the other groups could be treated according to whatever rules they were. If you were a part of the wolf tribe, then the bear tribe didn't need to be treated as fully. They weren't considered fully human in your cosmology, so they could be attacked because they were rivals. They were a threat. There was a limited amount of resources, and if they had it, then you didn't. Those sorts of things were all a part of the pagan cosmology. And that got me reading up on what real paganism was like back in the day versus what you see at like the Wiccan bookstore. um Magic crystals, healing crystals, and all of that stuff is, I mean, the magical control of reality is part of paganism, but underneath it is the cosmology that the world doesn't have a positive nature. The world isn't in its particular, it's not this way because God wants it this way. It's this way because somebody with enough power took the chaos and formed it.
And so
And that
what we have to
so
do is figure out how to get enough power to
to
form a new reality.
yeah, to hold the chaos back and to form
Oh, okay.
reality into what you want it to be. So the chaos will come in, and then somebody has to gather enough power to hold the chaos back, right? So there's fundamental chaos. There's no nature to reality. Things are held in this shape by force, by some sort of coercive power. The shape that we find things in is only here because of power, because of force. There's not an internal positive nature that things have that cause things to be in the shape that they're in, right? So if you so and this is why uh you know when you look at something like Darwinism, that's not new. Darwinism isn't a new idea. You actually run into things that sound exactly like Darwinism in old pagan writings, in magic textbooks, in um in or not, they wouldn't be called textbooks, books of magic in the ancient world, as well as philosophers talking about the forming of things and the evolution of things, right? The uh, Darwinism just says the reason that things are in this shape is because the power of physics forced them into this shape. The biological, the power of the physics and biology interacting forced things into this particular shape. So the it's survival of the fittest, right? So all of the death that gets us into this shape no longer matters, right? Because death is inevitable, death is the norm, death is expected, isn't an alien invader into reality.
It's
Death is
necessity to
yeah,
create
yeah,
more.
yeah, exactly. Death is the creative force, and that time and chance together with the power of physics, the power of an environment shaping something into its shape, that is the force that got a deer into the shape that it's in. You know, if you read biology textbooks, you can read about how the deer is the ancestor of the hippo, for example, right? That the hippo took on its shape because of its environment. The forces that of the environment changed a deer into a hippo over time through the mechanism of survival of the fittest, uh, at the DNA level, right? And you read that, and we nod along because we think that totally makes sense in a world like this, right? But but it's actually complete nonsense, right? Um, to there's not actually scientific evidence. It's the cosmological underpinnings that make that seem rational and reasonable. The cosmological underpinnings that one thing can become another if enough force is applied. That reality is held in this shape by force. You know, that the chaos is held in this shape by force. That's a pagan assumption, and it is everywhere cosmologically, and that's why you end up having to need tribes, blood sacrifices, child sacrifice, all the different things that rush back in when paganism moves to the forefront.
So then ultimately, in a sentence, paganism is what?
Um, Paganism is the belief that the world creates itself. I think that would be the
Mm.
fundamental that's the fundamental difference.
What happens? What happens? What is it? How does it play out? Um, how does it play out in culture, especially in a nation that hasn't? Oh, maybe it has, but I was going to say, especially in a nation that hasn't had paganistic roots, that's been predominantly Christian.
Yeah, yeah. The paganism that came back in, the assumptions of paganism, they start coming back in with the Enlightenment in the English speaking culture, with the Enlightenment in the Italian and um, in the Mediterranean language groups in Europe. It starts in the Renaissance, but it doesn't really show up in English speaking culture until you get to the Enlightenment. So on the continent, it's Northern Europe. It starts earlier than in England, and it's just because of the flow of ideas, right? So Machiavelli is really the one who begins bringing a pagan cosmology back during the Renaissance in Italy, and then his ideas spread throughout Europe, and then eventually into the English speaking lands, the British Empire eventually, through the Enlightenment is what we call it. So we really should call it the Endarkenment, I think, but that's a whole other thing.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, since you're there, I got to ask: did the Enlightenment bring anything good? Because I was reading an article on paganism just the other night, and the guy was hitting it. He was hitting it and nailing it. But then he's like, "These people reject the goodness of the Enlightenment," and I was like, "Arr?" Was there
Right.
was there anything?
Well, so that's actually the story that we tend to tell. There's a really great. So C.S. Lewis was the chair of Renaissance and medieval literature, and he tells the story of he says that way that we break up history into the history of ideas is actually not right. It's not good. We Because we come along and we call something um, the Renaissance, or we call it the Enlightenment, and he said usually the flow from one to the other is not a clean break. And so you've got something like the Enlightenment. Well, a lot of the thinkers of the Enlightenment at the that brought it back in, that were trying to bring in this older, to return to this different. They didn't think of it as returning. Some of them did think of it as returning to an ancient cosmology. A more classical cosmology is what they often called it. But a lot of them, they weren't trying to do anything like that. But they were um, the scientific advancements of the Middle Ages began to really make a huge difference in people's lives towards the high medieval eras, right? When you look at some of the feats of architecture that you got in like Gothic architecture, and these cathedrals and these the buildings that they were building in Rome at the time, that they were feats of science that hadn't really ever been seen. And so they start to say, what else can science do? And they just elevate the scientific method in the process because of the amazing advancements that are happening. There's a great quote from Cotton Mather about how when something is really successful, that it often destroys its own children, or the children destroy the source of the advancement, because they get so caught up on the advancement they don't realize where the advancement came from.
Mm-hmm.
And the children end up eating the mother, is how he put it. The success success
I know what you're talking about. I can't.
Yeah, I can't. The daughters of success end up eating the mother, something like that. And that happened with the scientific revolution, which really was a result of especially the monastic schools, right? The monasteries. You've got all these scientific advancements happening all over, and it's people get really infatuated with the scientific method. Not infatuated, but they realize how useful it is, and how that you can actually push a certain kind of knowledge forward, and then they give that knowledge preferential treatment to all other kinds of knowledge. There's all different kinds of knowledge that can be gained by the scientific method, knowledge that can be gained by the historical method, knowledge that can be gained by the poetic method, and there's all different kinds of knowledge. And they just said, well, but this knowledge is true knowledge and everything else is false knowledge. And they drew that mostly from Plato and a little bit of Aristotle. So then they said, here we go. This kind of knowledge is going to be the most important thing. The problem is that that implicitly had a cosmology embedded in it that they didn't realize, right? That so that's this new understanding of reality that begins in the Renaissance in Italy. There's a lot of really great stuff that came out of the Renaissance in Italy, but there was also this new cosmology. It's the metaphysics that makes magic make sense. And so a lot of the early Enlightenment guys start getting into alchemy and magic and witchcraft and all these different things. When we talk about the witchcraft of the Middle Ages, what we don't realize is that most of that is actually happening during the Enlightenment. You've got this, and they want to claim that there's ancient roots, so they tell the story as if I've got this ancient magical book here, but it's actually from the Enlightenment, because they understood that if the world has no nature, it's completely able to be reshaped if you have enough power. Then the real question is, how do you get the power?
How to get the power? Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you start getting magic. This growing magical understanding. You get magicians, you get witches, you get all of this sort of thing.
Well,
you also start to get the roots of socialism, which is just magic.
Well, yeah, that starts to make sense, because that's what witchcraft actually is, trying to get the blessings of God apart from the means that God gives you, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's
It's
trying to gain control of reality in order to get yourself something that you would either usually that you would normally get another way, right? Like,
right, right.
you know,
Through covenant blessings,
through covenant blessing,
right?
yeah, through covenant faithfulness.
Covenant faithfulness would breed success over time. Okay, there's a guy, Philip Jones, in here. I'm gonna try and give him a chance to. Um, Philip, are you there? You got a question? I'm not seeing Philip talking. You got to unmute your mic, Philip. There we go. I think he's connecting still. I have another question. I'm going to say this: if you're going to come and ask a question, that keep it short, keep it pithy, because I have a very trigger finger. I will cut you off quickly. I will end the conversation very fast. All right, Philip's not connecting, so we're going to move on past Philip. Sorry, Philip. I don't know why you didn't connect. Well, we'll try again. All right. So, hey, my guy Forrest Cooper is in here. What's up, Forrest? Let's see if
Oh, I just figured out that I can see the comments now.
Yeah, how you can see the comments.
There's a whole bunch of comments. Cool.
Forrest, are you connecting? There we go. Go ahead and Forrest. I'm not hearing anything from Forrest. Are you hearing anything from Forrest?
I'm not hearing anything from Forrest. I wonder if it's a problem on our end.
I wonder if the connection that I have. I told you guys it might be a train wreck. It might work on.
Still trying to figure this out.
Yeah, so I know I'm streaming on YouTube and Twitter and all the other stuff. That might be on me. Sorry, y'all. Yeah, I see that he's speaking, but I'm just not getting any sound back from him on my end. All right. So, Jason, as also too, guys, I put a link. If you there's a link that's on my Twitter page that gets you directly into the video chat as well. So if you can't, I'll figure out the speaker thing, what I might have done for the speaker stuff on Spaces. I'll figure that out. But if you still want to jump in, go to my Twitter, and there is a link in there right below the Twitter feed that gives you right into the chat that we're in. So, sorry, I'm working on it. My bad, guys. I'll get it fixed. So, Jason, can we talk about then how I want to get to how a Christian nation, a Christian group allows paganism, because I keep feeling like this with all of it. I think, first of all, I think everybody looks at the system as like, oh, this is critical theory. Oh, this is that, or this is the social justice, or this is wokeness. It seems like that paganism is at the root of all of it, right?
Yeah. Well, the same assumptions of paganism are behind all of those things. Right. And so, yeah, I think so. Paganism, if we think of paganism as a philosophy, then yes. Paganism doesn't usually think of itself as a philosophy. Paganism is a sociology, I guess, in practice. But if we think of it as a philosophy, the things that the assumptions that make it seem gut level reactions seem true, then yes, paganism is behind it.
So the question is, how does evangelicalism? I guess there's multiple questions. I want to talk about eventually, how do Christians share the same sort of cosmological understanding as paganism? Because it seems like that we have paganism even inside of Christianity, right?
Yeah, that's why we've got denominations.
Oh, wait, what?
So denominationalism is paganism. I mean, I think
thyself, mister.
And I think that's where it comes from in America. I don't think that the left or anyone brought it to America. I think that the fracturing of the church is what caused the America to revert to some sort of paganism. And some of this I'm getting from Christ's high priestly prayer. I mean, that's kind of the heart of where I think that's the heart of why I think this. But because he says you'll see when you see the unity of my people, then the triune reality will be seen and loved and embraced by the people around you. The Trinity is the opposite of paganism. The triune nature of God as creator, who has a different nature, the creator-creature divide, with the Trinity on the other side of the creator-creature divide. That's the exact opposite of paganism. And people can't see it because of the denominational divisiveness that the American church has embraced. Now, that did come from the modernist movement. Denominationalism came from the modernist movement. So it's alongside the growth of paganism, but it was the church's embrace of those assumptions that made denominationalism seem like a good idea, that made the rest of the culture eventually follow into the tribalism that we see. And the reason that I say that is because there is two different ways fundamentally of gathering people into groups. One is by covenant. The other is by culture. Right. So if you gather into groups because of likenesses rather than because of your relationship to God and the vows that you've made, then you are dealing in paganism. Right. If you say that our identity comes from this group, because I'm a part of this group and we have these similarities, whether it's theological Gnostic similarities, whether it's you're seeing a growth in white nationalism, black nationalism, Christian nationalism,
okay,
all the different kinds of ethnic nationalisms, all those different things as a way to say, here's where I get my identity from, some sort of thing that you can see about yourself, rather than about your objective sacramental relationship with God and the vows that you've made and the faith that you have, because faith is the mark of covenant keeping. Faith is what covenant keeping looks like. You're dealing in something other than the triune creator God's will for your life.
Are you just trying to offend everybody right now? Like, are you? I think you just, if you wanted to get the charismatic speaking folks on the side of the John MacArthur folks to come together to have a stoning party and agree on something, you have officially done that.
We'll finally find them all unity.
You have officially killed paganism. Like you
because paganism requires a scapegoat, to keep unity. So I'll be that scapegoat.
Okay, hold on.
My wife was like, "How does David get you to forget that you're being recorded?"
Everybody forgets. Hold on. Here's my guy. What's up, man? How you doing, Forrest?
Doing well. Can you hear me now? Do I actually have audio?
You actually have audio. Now listen, I'm gonna be tight with you. You got to jump in and get to it. What's up?
Sure. Okay, so let's go straight into the paganism in our contemporary culture.
Yeah.
How long do you think it's gonna, or not? How long do you think? We're moving from as the new atheist movement falls, something has to take its place, right? And so we're seeing these sort of return to paganism, and in return to paganism in an intellectual way, as opposed to some sort of like rote concept, right? It's like paganism isn't as simple as like, oh, the gods or multiculturalism. It's something more like worship of government now. And so,
well, that's where all the power is, right? It has to be, because that's where all the power is, right?
Yeah, well, it comes back to the fundamental sin that Adam and Eve committed in the
garden.
In the garden, when they said, "Well, we can create men like us. We can recreate the world in our image." And so, I mean, it's not exact. I'm paraphrasing pretty aggressively on that one, but there's a certain element of God's creation that they wanted to harness for themselves, and the most, let's just say, masterfully corrupted version of that oftentimes sits at the height of power. So then, how is that not any different than some sort of state sanctioned religion? Because I mean, paganism, I'm not It seems like we might be going two different directions in this way. One of them is like diagnosing how it came to pass, and the other question is what does it mean going forward?
But that's what we're about to get to.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right though that the question that the question that the Satan brings and then the promise that he brings, you will be like God, is at the heart of paganism, right? That you can have control. The question though is who the you is in, because there's different versions of that promise in our culture. On the one side is the you collectively. If we can get everybody on the same page and then gather all of that power into one spot in the federal government, then that they will have control over reality. And the only reason that they don't have control over reality is because you got these people over here that refuse to go along.
And sure, yeah. The fundamental error in any form of communistic government is that it has to be voluntary, and if somebody chooses to opt out of the program, it doesn't just cause that one person to be not a part of the club; it destroys the validity of the entire system.
The entire system, and this is Machiavelli. I mean, this was literal Machiavelli's teachings or his assumptions in letters that he wrote, because this isn't in the Prince, which is his popular work, but this is in his other works on metaphysics, that if you gather all of human power into a single leader, then that leader will have complete control over reality.
Sure, which it's easier, right? If you lower the position of godhood to that of government, it's easier to imagine oneself in the seat of power than it is to imagine oneself as the all-knowing creator.
Right. Well, and there isn't an all-knowing creator in this system. There's only the gods. Even are different powers that hold chaos back somehow. And so the question is who the you is. You will be like gods. So on the one side, you've got the collectivist paganism that says you means you as a group, when you all gather your power into one place and everybody goes along, right? That's the you that will have the power of God. And then you've got the individualist paganism or the tribal paganism on the other side, that where the you is actually an individual you, that you can be like gods and have control over reality. And that always ends up in some sort of tribalism. And in the ancient paganism, the priests of those groups were often the homosexuals or the hermaphrodites, so there's a priestly class that said, I have this power over reality, whereas I am a man, but I'm going to act like a woman, or a woman that's acting like a man. I have changed my nature, which makes me a priest able to guide you all into the changing of your nature, or the control over your nature. So we're seeing that. So I think there's both paganisms are on the rise at the same time, because fundamentally they have the same assumptions, but just different answers on what to do with in that world.
You got 30 seconds, buddy.
So on your assessment then, when I brought up the idea that paganism is changing in our current contemporary era, are you thinking that it's just the pendulum swinging from the new atheist movement to a different version, or is it actually a new rise in paganism? Is it just changing forms, or is it a new thing?
I think the new atheist movement was actually still assumed Christendom. So so I think that that now we're seeing so the paganism that was in the background, that was in the clubs in the 70s and the 80s, that was hiding in the dark back corners in bars, in New York in the 80s, is now out in the open and rising up. And one of the things it's putting down is the new atheists who were attempting to hold the world together in a Christendom-like way, but with atheism.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
So-
I'm gonna jump off here because you've got plenty of other things to do. But one thing, one word of encouragement that I have for you is that from my little perch in my ivory tower, basically everyone that I know and everywhere that I look, I am seeing men, especially men of valor, sort themselves out between those who pursue God and those who pursue themselves, and it's happening so very obviously and so very clear. So, if you want some encouragement, there's that. Is that
Praise God. Well, yeah, this God always has his remnant. I'm not concerned about that for 1 minute. For this good, man.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it is going to be interesting to see, because a lot of conservatives are trying to fight the one form of paganism with a different form of paganism, trying to fight centralization and with tribalization.
Yeah.
And there's no covenant in sight.
All right, there's two things. Jonas B, I see that you've logged on, but your device is not connected or working. So try again, Jonas, and I'll bring you in. I'm gonna try on Twitter Spaces. Who we have? BC. Let's see if we can bring him in. Benjamin Bowman. Benjamin, your mic is muted from my position. Unmute your mic. And I'm still not hearing Benjamin. Benjamin, this might not be you. This might be me, Benjamin. I'm sorry. If you go to the link like Forrest did, Forrest went to the link on my Twitter, logged in, and I'll bring you into the talking system on this side. I'll figure out the problem there. What's up, Gabe? It's good to have Gabe up in here. My guy. So then can we talk about the what I still want to work through a little bit. My head's a little scattered because I'm trying to run the YouTube. I'm trying to run the Twitter. I'm trying to run all the different things. But can we talk about what comes with paganism in the culture? Because yeah, there's fatherlessness. That's a huge part of it. But when you guys were talking about, I am the maker of my own sexuality and I get to decide. So I become a priest then all of a sudden. And then we're seeing those kind of priests, not just be priests like maybe in the corner in the back somewhere. There goes Ben. Ben, I'll bring you in just a second. But they're actually getting high levels of political power and offices inside the American government that I would have never seen before. Right? We have a transgender medical person. Like, how does that even work?
Well, like we act like we've done something righteous through putting them in, whereas you don't really have that, where you come along and you're like, hey, we're going to install this person into this role, and people are either like, hey, they're a good person, they're a good fit, or they're a bad fit. That's usually the discussion, not hey, we're going to have cheering and balloons because this person was installed into this job. We act like there's something more righteous about putting a transgendered person into a role, and that's because of
or a black person. We've all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got a black guy. It's like, yeah, but is he good at his job? Like, that's what I'm kind of concerned about here.
Right? Yeah. Because like when
or a woman.
When Clarence Thomas was being put into the Supreme Court, my dad sat me down and said, I want you to see this because this is important. This is one of the greatest men that we've ever seen put on the Supreme Court. There wasn't any discussion of it's because he's black or anything. My dad was like, this man is one of the greatest public intellectuals that our country's ever seen, and I want you to watch him be installed. But it's because he was going to be so good at his job, and because you don't usually get a great public intellectual put on the Supreme Court, like that sort of thing, was why my dad wanted me to watch it. So those sorts of questions have shifted and changed. What tribe does this person represent? And are they, how oppressed are they? Because Jesus has flipped the world inside out, so that a crucifixion, that somebody being scapegoated or crucified, or uh, somebody being cast out of the norm and being oppressed, that now that turns them into somebody righteous, right? And so we say, well, this person's from an oppressed tribe, therefore they're automatically righteous and can have some sort of priestly role. That's because Jesus just changed the world. I mean, he changed the nature of the world. That's not how you used to pick people that or decide who was righteous. In an old in an ancient tribe, the guy that the chief was the guy who beat up all the other guys. He was the strongest, or he was the wisest, or there was some reason to make him chief, that it wasn't. He lost a lot and was very oppressed.
So then
we're going to make him chief.
So in one sense, let me bring Ben in here real quick. But in one sense or another, part of what was part of what they're doing is taking our car and driving it off the cliff. They're getting in and driving it off the cliff. But they're still presuming somewhat of a our Christian worldview with their paganism.
Well, no, there isn't another world. The other world is gone. So if they don't play according to the rules of the current world, then it doesn't get anywhere. And so that they've just realized, we've got to use a martyr. We need a martyr, right? Because this is the kind of world that's run by a martyr, where martyrdom is the way up now. It just wasn't in the ancient world.
Hold that thought. I want to work through that a little bit. Ben, go ahead.
Well, hi guys. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. I agree with so much of what you guys are saying, and what you guys are talking about. It actually reminded me of a G.K. Chesterton quote. I'm just going to read for you real quick. It said, "Neo-pagans have sometimes forgotten, when they set out to do everything the old pagans did, that the final thing the old pagans did was to get christened or baptized." Right. So that's where all of this is heading. And this is secularism and godlessness circling the drain, and they all have to be somewhere. They all have to gather somewhere around something, because that's the way God made us. So this hatred for God, this hatred for the things of God, the character of God, they all have to get together and pretend that they're good people, because Demos is their God. The public opinion is their God, which is why so many people have a hard time in our culture with feeling judged or judging. It's a very common thing. So, I just wanted to get on here and just share that with you, that paganism is not new.
Right.
And not only is it not new from 2,000 plus years ago, 100 years ago, Chesterton saw it very clearly. He was dealing with anarchists. And that's what I see a lot of these people, not just the nightly news, smashing windows and, taking whatever they want, but we have anarchy, because without Christ as the center for our culture, that's the only other option. There is no other option but Christ. It is Christ or chaos, and it cannot right itself. It has no ability to save itself, because there's no good news.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just meant for the grave, that's why, if you want to get really into what pagans, how they think, what godless people think, start investigating Cthulhu. Start investigating cosmic horror. It's all the rage in the TTRPG community and video games, and it's the multiverse. That's another one. If you want to start getting into the way they think about things, is their idea of God is this cosmic horror that's going to destroy them at any moment. And every time I see a coexist sign, I just see the evil god Cthulhu, because that's what all of that is in disguise, and it's demonic. But that's where we're at right now. And but the good news is it's not going to last, because it can't.
Yeah,
it can't.
It's gonna come to a head. Hey, Ben, thank you, brother.
Yep.
Yeah. Cthulhu is the attempt to resurrect in the imagination what it's like to live in a world that is fully chaotic and trying to kill you all at the same time, right? Which is why you need the control of some sort of either a god like Zeus that overthrows the Titans and then holds them at bay.
It's how people are picking between Trump or DeSantis. But that's the question they're asking. Who's going to be the guy
that can hold back the chaos for a little bit longer?
For a little bit longer. And there's really not, one of the things that you talked about as well, Jason, and I see you, Philip, I see you, and Max. I'm going to get to you guys in just a second. And everybody on Spaces, just so you know, I just found out, I think Ben told me on Space, thank you for talking to me on Twitter. It's not y'all's fault that you can't talk on Twitter. It's my fault. Okay. Or, I'm sorry, X on Space. So I'll fix that next time around. So anyway, there's a link on my Twitter if you want to jump into the conversation. But you talked about the violence that comes with paganism.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Right. Well, there's an unavoidable violence for a couple of reasons. Because one, in order to hold a community together, because of the way people are, you have to have a common enemy. Right? There is an embedded violence within each person. So it's either going to be directed against your closest neighbor, or you and your neighbor are going to direct it at a common enemy, right? And so this is why in the ancient world there was always some sort of scapegoating mechanism that was built in, so that if you started to get a lot of conflict within a society, then you had to find a common enemy or pick somebody within the tribe to pour all of your ire out on and blame. You're the reason. You're the reason that this that all of us don't feel settled in our identity and in our. You're the reason that there's so much conflict. I remember, my favorite bumper sticker that was all over Santa Cruz County was that I hate George Bush and I vote. And I was like, the reason that this place holds together is because they all hate George Bush and they blame George Bush together. He's the scapegoat. He's the intellectual scapegoat for why I'm so why there's so much ennui or disruption within my soul. But if you don't find a place to direct the violence, you'll direct it against your neighbor. And if you're gathered into a group based on a common culture, then your neighbor is supposed to be one of the tribe, by one of your people. And so you have to have some sort of scapegoating mechanism. I mean, I honestly think this is one of the things going on in the book of Job. I think it's one of the things going on in the Man Amongst the Tombs. Is that
demon possessed man?
Yeah, the demon possessed man. But like with Job, why is it that you have all of these people gathered around trying to convince Job to just admit that he's the issue? Well, so that they can scapegoat him, right? Because you don't have fire just randomly fall from heaven and burn up a bunch of people at a party, usually. And everybody's going to be sad and upset because it's not going to be just Job's children that die in something like that, right? People die and then they're going to say, what's going on? Why is there fire falling from heaven? Why is our village falling apart or our tribe falling apart? What's going on? Job, just admit it's you. We can then all blame you together. And he just keeps saying, it's not me. It's not me. He refuses to be scapegoated. over and over, he refuses to be scapegoated. And he's right. It's not him. It was God and Satan directing all of that ire towards him, in order to turn Job into the person that God had in mind for him, in order to bring him an even greater blessing. And God planned on doubling his blessing, and that's what it looks like, to find a resurrection blessing. But he refuses to be scapegoated all along, and they keep coming back, and they keep pressing and pressing and pressing. Just admit that all of this is your fault, Job. And because it wasn't, and he refused to be scapegoated, and so you see this, but you see this scapegoating mechanism all over the place. You see it in families that only get along during election season because they all really hate the Democrats, and but the rest of the year they fight. The rest of the time they fight, but during election season they can throw their ire outward. And the only real solution is Jesus, who is the actual scapegoat, an effective scapegoat, which is why when the gospel is preached, tribes that used to scapegoat one another become peaceful neighbors, and eventually
I want to talk about that. I want to work through that in just a second. I want Philip jump in here. Philip is not, his mic is muted. All right, Philip, you got 3 seconds.
I was just gonna say, in Twitter Spaces, the icon to speak is a mute icon. I was just trying to mute myself, brother.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Philip. I'll remove him. You can stay right there and listen. All right. Let's see. We got Max. Max, you got a question? Jump in here. What's your question, man?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for your work. First of all, I appreciate it. I think we probably are going to have some disagreement on some things.
Let's go, Max.
With what you guys are talking about. I wasn't in for the whole video or whatever, but I don't know if you guys defined paganism. Did you do that at all?
Yep.
Okay, so I didn't hear your definition. I think I got on too late. But pagan behavior, I would just want to define as basically disregarding God's word, doing what God says not to do. I don't know if that's an adequate definition. That's what I want to. That's what I see with the pagans in the Bible. Is they're just people who disobey God and his word. Is that fair?
Well, we were talking about, we divided it up into paganism as a philosophical system, a set of assumptions and ideas, summarized as the world creates itself. So the world doesn't have a creator God.
Okay. Right. So a little more cosmological is where you were going with it. Okay. Yeah. You did say something I definitely agree with, where you said that the Republican Party is trying to fight paganism with different paganism.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the most important thing in politics right now, is to recognize that the Republicans are fundamentally pagans. They fundamentally deny God's law as their authority. Like I just saw someone, I think who's in the Congress, and he said that a tweet was bigoted because the tweet said we need to follow Jesus, and he said that's a bigoted tweet. That's not an American tweet. So I think I'm kind of having trouble with not seeing how Christian nationalism is not pagan. So that's the trouble I'm having, because I've been following the Christian nationalists. I'm following the Christian nationalists. I'm reading the Christian nationalists. They seem to be pagans to me, and I'm bolstered in that position because when I read the old school of theonomists, it seems like they're saying the same thing. Men who are respected theonomists like Andrew Sandlin thinks that Christian nationalism is pagan. Philip Kaiser, who you've had on Cross Politic, calls Christian nationalism a manifesto for Christian tyranny. Like, I'm not seeing how Christian nationalism is not just pagan statism that's got lipstick on. So if you could just talk about that for a minute.
All right, Max. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So can I start off real quick?
Yeah, you go first.
All right. So I think that there are having a lot of friends that are Christian nationalists. I think there are a lot of theonomists that are Christian nationalists that are just using the title and are saying, you know what, I'll just redefine everything that nationalism stands for and redefine what I mean by nationalist and Christian, make sure that those things are within my theonomic worldview. What we haven't seen come to head yet, and I think in order to be able to make some of this very clear, Max, we're going to have to see the theonomists and the Christian nationalists have a conversation. And until we see that, it's going to be a little difficult to try, because when people, even the word theonomy, there are multiple people who have theonomy, and they're different places on this. And you're like, whoa. And the Christian nationalists, there isn't, this is, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said one of the things that's a problem with Christian nationalism is that there isn't a cohesive thought really around it, right? Like there's not one, there's multiple. And so you have to be careful on which brand you're talking about. And they're talking culture and covenant, and I think a lot of them mean covenant while they're using culture, and it's all mixed up. And so it's a tangled web, and I'm not willing to call all the Christian nationalists pagans. I think Christian nationalism and nationalism in itself definitely has some massive paganistic cosmology that it shares, but I have to, you got to tell me who you're talking about first before I can actually apply that directly to it. But if we're going to talk about just what the Christian nationalism in and of itself, the actual name, and that's what I think guys like Sandlin and Kaiser, I think they're dealing with, if words actually mean something, then let me deal with that. But then what people are meaning by the words, it's all over the place.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is, when I hear the term Christian nationalism, and I know what nationalism has meant historically, nationalism was the way out of the old cosmology, into this cosmology on a, so instead of needing an international power grab, you could settle for a national power grab. So a power, but most people on the street actually don't know what nationalism is, and so when they say nationalism, they often just mean patriotism. I would like a Christian nation. I would like, so that's the difficulty is when you've got Jello and you say, oh, let's nail it to the wall, you actually get a mess, not Jello nailed to the wall. You can't, and Christian nationalism is still in that phase. But I think, this is a problem all across the board, because I think theonomy is in that same category.
Watch it.
Because, when I say, well, I'm not a theonomist, and then people say, yeah, sure you are. Now, I said, well, but the theonomists that I've talked to said this, and another theonomist says, but that's not theonomy. It's like, okay, well, we've got to actually give definitions before we start dealing. So I would say,
I think I see a Foster in the chat. I see a Foster in the chat. Go ahead. I'll let you finish. I'll bring Mike Foster in.
Yeah. So what I would say is, insofar as the kind of Christian nationalism that wants to rest a lot on ethnicity and common culture as the thing that has the power to hold us together, rather than covenant and legal objectivity, you're talking paganism. You're talking tribalism, the tribalistic kind of paganism, because the Christian understanding of nations and tribes and tongues, and it is that that legal requirements are held together by covenants. There's a legal objectivity to them. There's a historic reality and historic objectivity that comes from vows, the vows and the covenant requirements. So that's a that if I said, who is my neighbor and who is a stranger in the land, that those are
those who've been circumcised.
that who is a stranger in the land, it is a legal question, right?
Right.
There are legal, objective covenant standards by which to answer that question. It's not, you're not talking DNA, you're not talking culture, you're not talking ethnicity. None, those things are not, that's not the question you're asking in those settings in a Christian understanding of.
And so
legal,
when you think,
civics.
But when you think about your children, you think about your kids, they fit underneath the legal realities of the covenant, though, right? So
right, because a covenant by definition includes the next generation.
Yeah. God made covenant with Adam and his posterity. Michael Foster, what's up, bro?
Hey guys, how you doing?
We doing good.
Thought I'd hop on here real quick. I'm driving my son.
Bro, you in so much trouble. What you doing driving and talking on the phone? Hey, if you get pulled over, just keep filming. That's all I want. I just want it all.
Yeah. And
I can look at the road
and Knox explained to me that you have to keep your hands visible.
No, he don't have to.
But there's a lot of things leading to this paganism. Hey, by the way, Jason, how in the world can you have a legal reality that doesn't yield culture?
Well, it can yield culture, but it's not. Doesn't rest on culture. The legal reality is not
intertwined. Doesn't
not. It depends on how you're defining culture. So but you don't. The culture is not the.
Ruth
is not the foundation.
It's okay. Oops, sorry. Okay.
I guess when
I look at Ruth leave, and I apologize for that. When I see Ruth leaving the Moabites, right? So she does make a covenant. She calls on God's covenant name, Yahweh. But she also says, "Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." She immediately comes in and synchronizes to the culture of the land, right? She goes underneath the law of gleaning and all that sort of stuff. And whereas in Nehemiah 13, the Moabite wives that are married to the Israelites, they produce children that don't speak their language and whatever. And so why Nehemiah is so tough on them is because they're still very much Moabites in their culture and commitments in their worship. And he warns them. Whereas in Ruth, you see a real leaving of her people and identifying with Israel through both the covenant, but also in adopting the culture. It just seems like those things are deeply intertwined to me.
Right, but it's just a question of which rests on which. Right, because it's not, because you can't change culturally, but never take the legal reality onto yourself.
True, I can see that.
Except I think that's what people want to argue, though.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is one thing that I think is going on with the Return of Paganism. I've noticed this with like Michael Heiser's stuff, and I'm not a Michael Heiser fan at all. I don't really like his stuff, but I think rationalism was a huge part of it, where Christians had synchronized to rationalism in a sort of materialistic worldview. And the world's clearly, enchanted. The world's full of all sorts of crazy stuff. God's cosmos is a spiritual, physical reality. And there's no way to deny that, especially when you read the Old Testament. And I think the church's failure to teach and preach through the Old Testament has people, and I know the New Testament's full of miracles and wonderful things as well, but just the fact of how God's involved in the mundane and all these awesome things comes across in the Old Testament. And part of the problem is that people have a deep hunger for spiritual things. It's just in who they are. They know the world's not, all these aliens are. It's just the latest version of Sprite.
Hey, Mike, you're breaking up real bad, man.
Yeah.
Like, I actually just froze up. Try it. If you can come back in with a better connection, because I got questions for you. I want to know what you mean by culture.
Yeah.
Like, I want to define what culture is.
Because I think he's absolutely right about the materialism, though.
Well, no, yeah. But here, when we're talking about culture, it's to act as if, and I don't think Mike is getting at this point at all, but to act as if Christianity or covenant realities to God don't come with the culture would be insane. Right. Like that, of course they do. That's not, I think there's another conversation happening underneath that we're not having, because everybody knows when you make covenants, you are creating a culture right there. And God is giving you your culture ultimately. The question we're asking,
I think, planting the seeds of a culture.
Well, yeah, well, you're gonna have festivals, you're gonna have celebration days, you're gonna have Sabbath days, you're gonna have feasts, you're gonna have, my wife and I, when we got married, created a whole different culture than what was originally in our family, right? That became unique to us, right? Now, we had other covenants with other people that we were still attached to, so we shared some of that. But my kids are so when we talk about culture, I think there's a covenantal reality of culture that comes from Christendom, but then we're not actually talking about the other culture that breeds from nations and from people and groups. I don't think we're having that conversation yet. And that is a conversation we're really trying to have. Because I don't think anybody's going to say is like, okay, if you become a Christian, of course you bring it into a Christian culture. Yeah, duh. Everybody. But what is that? What does that look like? How do you define that? Right? What are the parameters by which you have a Christian culture? And if we're just talking about Christian culture, then there's no argument here. But that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about ethnic culture, right? We're talking about racial cultures. That's what and nobody really, I want to have, that's the conversation I think is underneath the reality of this, of what's going on when we're talking about culture. That's what I want to know. Like, Mike, if you can jump back in, if you get a signal anyway, jump back in.
Yeah, because I do think that that when you start, that we don't easily separate, our national identity and our Christian identity. And so when you, but I do think that they both have to be, or it ought to be, landed on,
here we go. I think
primarily on a covenant, right? The big failure of our immigration policies is that we bring people in, but don't bring them into the national covenant. That should be a part of bringing people into America is, hey, you want to join? Here's the national covenant. Here's citizenship. Here's what it looks like. I mean, I lived in California. Most people never become citizens that cross the border. And that causes all sorts of problems because you don't have the legal system at the base of everything that grows up there.
Yeah, Mike, did you hear what I was saying? Were you able to catch any of that earlier? Before
Jason didn't call somebody a transvestite again, did he?
Yeah, that's why you jumped out, so you knew it was about to happen.
It's like, don't connect me to that mess. Leave me out of that stuff.
You're part of the movement now, bro. That's part of your culture. No, I was saying, like, what do you mean by culture? Because I think that every Christian, I don't care who you talk to, every Christian is going to say there's Christian culture. You come into covenant with Christ, you're coming into a whole different world, a whole culture, right? And so when people are talking about culture, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. I think there's a group of us talking about culture that we all obviously agree on, but we're really trying to have a conversation about race and the cultures that come from that, though.
I mean, so I grew up biracial. My uncle Roberto introduced me to well, don't judge me that way, man. Okay, don't do that. Right. But my uncle Roberto introduced me to Guns N' Roses, Alice in Chains, D&D, and he was black as midnight with a huge fro. Right.
Right.
And so I think part of I don't want to get into this too much because this is like one of those transvestite sort of things that it goes wrong. Then I got to deal with this for months. And I'm like, I barely know Jason. Right. He's not in the Series C's and the PCA. Don't leave me out of it. But but it does. People do make race and culture way more synonymous than they are. And so if you grow up diverse, like I did, right? I grew up on at one point I went to a school where the whites were the minorities, so I learned to hold my own real quick and how to manage that. And I grew up watching New Jack City, and I grew up with your mama jokes, and I grew up watching Living Color.
Is that what you're trying to get? You trying to get your black card?
I had it long ago. I don't need it. That's why I don't fit into the reform world.
Right. I get it. Really, I do.
Autistic white boy. Nonetheless, but then I also lived on a university campus where you have a lot of people coming from, like IU had lots of Asians. And so I grew up with a lot of people, friends from Korea and Japan. And when you just live around that, you know how similar people are because they bear the image of God and same thing. So I remember when I started meeting these pastors in Acts 29 back in the day that were all about racial reconciliation. And I told them that I thought their problem was they grew up in the suburbs, and the first black guy they met in college that they really got to know their entire life was a liberal, and they think black people are the Borg, and they have like some sort of hive mind. So you meet this black liberal guy in college, and suddenly you think all blacks think this way. You're trying to reconcile them, and I'm like, I have lots of black friends that kind of run the spectrum politically, certainly in the shows and things they want. So a lot of this is people just are, when I hear some of the sort of kinnis talk and whatever, I do think some of these people are relatively isolated and haven't had a lot of interaction. And if they did, they would know where the cultural differences lie in a less cartoonish way on both sides. That's kind of from my perspective on that. But with culture, I mean, we mean the way of life that flows from religion being externalized, right? We mean our music, our food, everything, but it's also the way you do it. Keller did a lot of, go on. Sorry.
What's Christian food?
Christian food is food that's received with thanksgiving and ate with gratitude. Yeah. And so, Keller, there's so many bad things about Keller, but there was good things he said. And one point he made is that the subculture, it looks different on the outside than the main culture, but really what drives it's the same on the inside, same stuff. Where a counterculture often can look at some level, when we're talking about sort of external trappings, clothing, whatever, they can look similar on the outside, but what drives them on the inside are totally different, right? And so I think what most people have is subcultures that are really mimicking mainstream conversations happening as opposed to deeply driven by biblical worldview and convictions. And so so you can have things like the way you eat food is different from one group to the next, depending on what your religious commitments are, whether you're a Christian or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, table manners. I don't think that, that seems exactly right. I'm fine with that. But there's something else underneath this conversation. I don't know how to get at it, that it feels like they want to say or that they're not saying. I'm like, y'all, let's just beat up straight and say it and not feel like we have to hide behind.
Well, how about the LA riots, if you want to talk about race? So one of the things behind the LA riots that I've read is that there was huge tension between the urban poor black population and Asians.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
And part of the reason, if you've grown up around lots of kind of urban black culture and Asian culture, which I have, they are diametric opposed in the way they communicate. So like my black friends, if you made a good joke, they'd be like, "Oh no," and they like run away, laugh, and yeah. Very dramatic, right? Yeah. And Asian people, if they're happy or angry, a lot of times it looks the same. And also they don't have, I can remember when I'd walk into stores, how the Asian shop owners would just watch me because they thought I was stealing, because I was. But that's neither here nor there. But they're very stern, kind of downplayed reactions. And so there was like a deep animosity building between those two groups. And a lot of it was like people not understanding like the cultural differences that are very real there. Some which are really secondary and others that are primary out of worldview. So I do think what people are sensing, like, look, I think there's deep differences between certain people groups.
Yeah.
And when we downplay that, it hurts our ability to bring them along to see kind of the whole picture. And so I think that's some of it. And they're identifying it along genetic lines too tightly, but others that deny that there's different different distributions, IQ distributions in certain genetic pools, that's not helping either. That's like, you can't deny that, but you can explain why that happens too. Like, there's a reason why these things are tied together, and they're ultimately driven by cultural factors, not by genetic factors. Like, culture leads that.
Bro, I just got to jump in here and say that, it's really weird because you have then somebody like Oliver Anthony who drops a song, and that is transcending all of the cultural and all of a sudden it's one culture now, and it don't matter what race you are. Everybody, I've watched every nationality, group, culture, watch his video and be like, man, he's right. That is a damn shame. Right. And all of them are connected around that. And so it seems like the thing the covenant is ultimately what's missing in unifying those subcultures.
Well, socioeconomics are more powerful than a lot of the secondary cultural things. So if you put a rich white guy and a rich black guy in a room with a poor white guy and a poor black guy, people that don't know better will think the two black guys will connect and the two white guys, but they're wrong. It's the wealthy will connect, because those are two different ways of living. Those are two different ways of conducting yourself that are very different. And generally, and some evidence of that would be how you used to see this play out on college campuses. We're getting a little more divided these days, obviously, but the ability for people from very different cultures to become close friends and intermix when they're suddenly thrown all into the same dormitory or whatever at the same life stage with the same connections is pretty.
Oh, snap. You outnumbered now, or it's tied. It's got Burt Walker in here now. So I just want to say,
wait, which of us is the poor two and which is the rich two? If we're
figuring out.
Knox got that Fight Laugh Feast money. Look at that.
Yeah. No, G3 money is where it's at, though. G3 money. That's where you want to be at. Virgil, is your mic on? I don't see your mic on. I'm not hearing you.
Yeah.
There we go.
You got me?
There we go. Foster, I just want to say this real quick. I think you're right about the two black guys and the two white guys, rich and poor. I think the setup that you just gave, I think you're right about that until a hip hop song comes on, and then all bets are off the table, right? There's something there that even transcends the socioeconomic realities, right?
He's just talking about how good at crunking I am.
Yeah, because when hip hop has been for me one of the only genres that I've seen, because of the way that it samples from other cultural genres and brings them all together. It's almost like a unity that it's a unity there that rich, poor, white, black, Asian, they all kind of come together underneath that. And it's a whole different thing. And that's where I like is like, well, they've all come together underneath this kind of reality of the covenant of hip hop to say, yes, that represents a Wu-Tang. I mean, look at the people who follow Wu-Tang, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is, how is it that hip hop can be the thing that unites covenantally everybody together, and somehow Christendom has us fighting over everything? Don't
you think some of that,
we ain't got
black friends that weren't allowed to listen to hip hop growing up. They had to listen to black gospel and jazz music.
That was me.
And isn't some of that though nostalgic, like a connection, a shared past? So maybe they're at a different place right now where they're socioeconomically, but the power of nostalgia, like for example, like I've really moved up, and if you want to talk about upward mobility over my life, I grew up on food stamps and government cheese. I love government peanut butter, man. You have to mix the oil in on the top. You rip it off, big white can, mixed it all up. Stuff was delicious.
Virgil, give him his card. Give him his card, man. Just give him.
He had me at New Jack City.
Oh, yeah. I can do a perfect impression of screaming Ricky when Ricky gets killed in Boys in the Hood, man. Ricky, that whole thing. Yeah. But yeah, man. I mean, I grew up listening to Two Live Crew and all that stuff. That's how I came up. But nonetheless, going back to, I do wonder, I think culture is so multifaceted. We're so short bus retarded today that it's so hard to have real conversations. Because I look at this, and there's ways that, like, so when my mom died a couple weeks ago, so my closest friends growing up were all black, and so they drove down to, I hadn't seen some of them in like 15 years. But I told my wife when we got married, I'm like, look, if Quinn calls me up and tells me we got to bury a body, we got to bury a body. Sorry, babe. Like, we got arrested together. We came up together. It's just the rules, right? And so we were real tight. So they drive down, and then I just change. Now, I didn't lose my faith or anything, but it was a different way, man. Like a different way of talking, a different way of joking, a different way of relating. And they just brought me back there. And it was one of the best gifts I could get on my mom's funeral. Right. These are people that just we came into adulthood together. And when I became a Christian, neither of them were Christians at the time. And they were so happy because we were like getting arrested for crazy stuff. And they were glad. But suddenly I was just transported back to my childhood and so I came up. So I a lot of times when I hear these cultural conversations, there's like someone this morning asked me, give the purpose of marriage in 3 words or less. No. How about I don't? Why do we keep creating these like 4 words or less? No, that's not how you do things. What's the main factor? Man, I don't know. Like, if you want me to weigh all the factors with different percentages, you know how complicated this is all going to start getting? So I think part of the conversation is like, you have to have people that are in the pursuit of truth together, trying to figure out how do we build bridges and understand each other and what connects. In this conversation, so charged, the rhetoric's so charged, and everything. It's like, do I think genetics play a factor? Yeah. Do I think they play the factor that some of these people are saying online? No, I don't. But if I say that, like the number of kinnists who follow me, right? Irish Pawnee Jew, like, right, bloodlines, Native American, Jewish, and Irish, and that was raised by a Holocaust survivor who adopted a black son who I grew up with. The number of Kenneths that follow me always blows my mind. I'm like, I know you guys think I'm on your side, and I don't hate y'all, but this isn't my camp. Trust me. Yeah. But as soon as I admit to, they're like, yeah, I think there's genetic factors that play out in this. Then they're claiming me up, and then their enemies are going to turn me into a Kenneth, which is like, it's crazy, right? I've like been very clear that's not where I fall. Or if I downplay that and I say, well, the gospel really does unite transnational, it does connect people in these major ways. Suddenly now I'm a Gnostic egalitarian that's denying the diversity that God's put into the world, including human beings. That's the sort of dialogue we're having right now. The rhetoric is so intense and so over the top that it's really hard to have the conversation. And so when you can't, those sort of people that are like that, you just gotta block them. Elon's gonna make us not block them, being a punk, but you just gotta block them. You can't have that talks. And so trying to find the level-headed people in the groups that actually want to think through this stuff. Like my friend Michael Griffin said, he was hanging out with all these sort of racial reconciliation Acts 29 groups. And they're like, why black people come to our church? What do we need to do to get more black people to our church? And Michael said, they never thought maybe we don't want to go to your church. Like, maybe we're going to our local church that we grew up in. They're doing gospel music, and we've got our culture that's like, it's Christian, but it's our own. Like it's a byproduct of that place and time that God put you, that different history and all that stuff. And it's still very Christian, but it's contextual to the group of people. Like maybe we don't want to, in this sort of pursuit of a church that's like demographically balanced, right? Like if you make my church, East River, demographically balanced, we got to chop one black guy in half so we could have one black guy and a half of a black guy, right? Like I guess this top half is a half we'll take, but because there's not a lot of black people out here in this county. And
well, why not? Well, why not?
Because there's not lots of you. There's not very many. What, 15, 20%? I don't know, 25?
13, 15, something like that. But Virgil, you just dropped in. Hey, I see Jason Whitlock's in here too. Hey, Doc, I sent you a text if you want to jump in to the video side of the conversation as well. Just want to salute those guys, a couple other brothers. All right, so I'm going to give the floor to Virgil. Virgil, you popped in. You didn't even know what you was getting into. Just so you're here with the four of us now. So go ahead. You got.
No, I just thought the conversation was interesting, man. And anytime I see your brown ball, beautiful face, man, I stop and click and see what's popping. You know what I'm saying? So then I heard my brother talk about New Jack City, and I said, "Oh, give that man a black card." So you know. I was all in on that. Talking about culture and its impact, and I just, you know, I'm not one. I like all the stuff you're talking about, like going and if your friend called and you had to bury a body, you had to bury a body. I don't know anything about that. Like I have zero framework for that.
Told me yesterday.
Now I've got uncles, you know, on my dad's side that know, you know, jail time, drugs, whole nine yards. But I never attached that to that's what it meant to be black. I just attached that to that's what it looks like to be stupid. And so I did what I did. You know, I mean I was the kid that got, you know, that I could tell you. I'll tell you one story. And there was this girl. I was in an area of, I think this was Tulsa, Oklahoma. In an area of Tulsa, Oklahoma, predominantly white area, white neighborhood, going to predominantly white school. And so, you know, for the most part, you know, you didn't have you know, lot to choose from if you were going to stay within your ethnicity as far as dating is concerned. So this one beautiful sister shows up. She's black, Puerto Rican. I'm like, oh, this is gonna work. Like this is gonna work. She had just moved in. I'm thinking, this is wonderful. So I start kind of trying to charm her and all of that. And this was the first time I found out, you know, I was not black enough for her. I didn't speak, you know, street slang, and I wasn't hardcore enough, and all of this. And man, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, you know. So what I tried to do in an effort to impress her was, because here was the catalyst. Like we had you know, every quarter you hit the honor roll. They would send you to a special you know, thing that they have for all the honor roll students. You'd show up and they give you your award or whatever. So I went, had a 3.5 or 3.6 GPA, and I was mad because I didn't hit higher, all of that. They all of the honor roll students, you would leave the class, right? And so everybody else was left. So they knew who you were. So I left the class and got my little award. And I was kind of disappointed, like, man, I really want to, you know, get to the next level, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8. I get back to the class and she just kind of looking like, I'm like, what? She's like, man, you up there acting white, doing them grades like that. I was like what? Like, what are you talking about? And sure enough, the thought process in her mind was, you know, acting white was getting good grades, speaking proper English, all of those kinds of things. So, and then again, in an effort to impress her, the next quarter, I hit the big 2.8, and I'm thinking, now I'm down for the cause. You know, I could get them digits now, like boom, and she still wasn't having it. So.
Bullet dodged.
Yeah. No doubt bullet dodged. I definitely followed her life thereafter, and it was not a pretty sight at all. So
here's something that's interesting. So my experience, this is how diverse it is. In Lawrenceburg, Indiana, where I grew up, right across from Seagram's whiskey plant. I stole a barrel of whiskey from there once, but the white families were pretty broken. The poor white families were, including mine. But the black friends, like, you know, dad was around, but the black women, they just they just kept everyone so disciplined, man. It was like they were intense. And I remember one night we were out till like 2 or 3 in the morning, me and my friend Quinn, at this girl's house. We shouldn't have been. It was like a weekday during school. We came back, and as he was about to go in the back door of his house, his mom opened the door, and she said, "Boy, get your stuff off. You're getting whooped." And then I laughed, and she said, "Mike, you want some too?" I said, "No, ma'am." So I went home, but I was like, "No, ma'am." But anyhow, I think it was interesting. There was still discipline in that culture, and in Coming Undone by Charles Murray, he talked about basically what the cultural rot is everywhere now. And that was happening in Lawrenceburg. It was very like the white poor culture was very dirty. Is what I remember. Very dirty. And when I went to my poor black friend's house, it was actually always tidy and nice. And it was just very different. And I just remember there being discipline still in the homes by the men somewhat. The men seemed to discipline via shame a lot. Like shame was like a real powerful tool in that group. And I think that's something that's good, can be really good and helpful. But I don't know, when I have those experiences, I don't hear other folks talking about it. And I don't know how unique Lawrenceburg was. I got the sense it's not, but I don't hear people talk about that.
Hey, I got a question, Knox. Did you and I don't as long as I know you, I don't even know this. Did you have your father in the home?
Yeah, until about 11 or so. Yeah, so there was, it's funny because growing up, being around all my black friends who didn't, I was one of the few who had my dad around. Matter of fact, even amongst my brothers and sisters, so I have like 12, 13 siblings, probably more than that actually, when I think about it. And my dad stayed with us more than he stayed with any of my other brothers and sisters. So he stayed with my mom longer than he did with my other brothers and sisters. And so there was a radical difference of how my sister and I grew up versus the rest of my brothers and sisters. Yeah. And not just that, but even with my friends around me, we had different disciplines, hardworking disciplines to get in there and grind and to work and to get things done, not asking questions. My dad was ex-military, so we jumped in there and got things done. But the area when I really, where I see the lack of where I see father hunger in my own life is, the turn to going from, I'm going to use these terms, but I don't mean them exactly the way they are going to be used, but from a slave to a king. The Bible talks about the servant is just like the son in one sense until he comes to a certain age and he steps into his kingship. That transition for me is something that I have continually had to remind myself, you're not a slave anymore. You're not, and so my dad not being there for the teenage years left me in a place where, yeah, I can work hard. Yeah, I can grind. Yeah, I can get things done. But I don't know when it's time to rule. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I've had to learn, like, okay, take off your slave clothes, go put your king clothes on and rule. And to be very honest with you, the only thing that has, how do we get here at a counseling session with I was not trying to go here today.
I'm just curious, man.
But was getting married. And the thing that really helped me was like, I know one thing for sure. I'm not getting a divorce. Whatever happens in my marriage, we are staying together. I don't care if she kills me in the middle of this. We're going to stay together. Right. I might have to call Matt to bury a body. But the thing was that helped me mature and say, I got to lead this woman. So I got to figure out how to do it. Sure. And so I had to go and find autobiographies and I had to go and watch other men. And part of the reason I came out to Moscow was that, this was another level of being around a concentrated group of men who were leading their wives and leading their families. And everybody thinks, they come out here for Doug. Like, that's great. If Doug wasn't here though, there's such a high concentration of men being husbands and fathers, ones that people don't even know about, that were so impressionable to me and impressed upon me how to lead. And they don't even know it, right? I call it keeping up with the Joneses of sanctification. And so there is a level where, a father in the earlier stages of a young man's life, my mom and dad finalized the divorce probably when I was 11 or 12, somewhere on there. But it helped frame certain things for me that I had never had framed. And now my kids are coming into another stage of life where they have finally had me longer than I've had my dad. My daughter's 15. My son is 13. They're going to be 16 and 14 and before the end of the year. And now I'm realizing the things that I need to lay out that I never had. So I have to go and learn those things so I can teach them what it looks like to mature and have that father around. So and this kind of brings me to what I want to. Virtue, is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Because
I was curious. We have very similar paths that you and I walk. Same deal. My dad just passed away here about a month ago, and so just kind of navigating that process, thinking through that, and again reflecting on his role in my life. Very similar to you. I'm not a statistic. Like I know who my dad is. I don't I'm not like looking for father affirmation. My dad was always there. Like you explained your dad, my dad taught me how to work. Work ethic was driven into me like crazy. My dad, I tell people he was functionally illiterate. He could not read. He would learn to kind of sound things out, or he would memorize particular words, and he would kind of put that together in order to get by.
Yeah.
There were a lot of times when I would go to places where my dad would work, and I would read things to him. So if he had to put together something, he had a janitorial business. So if he had to put like chemicals together to do something for a floor or something like that, I would read that to him and tell him what needed to happen. And so, and again, he would come home and use the Bible, and he would read and memorize. And so he could function, but for the most part, he didn't even have a sixth grade reading level. My dad didn't graduate from the sixth grade. And so it was always about work. And so like you said, like learning about what it meant to rule, and to reign and to lead, that came from reading other men, other books, examples of other men. I always gravitated toward wanting to be around older men, from a standpoint of example, and that kind of thing. So same type deal. Was never missed the love of my father. No, my dad loved me and proud of me and all of that, but just learning, having to learn next steps. What does it mean to lead a family? What does it mean to function in an executive role at work or what have you? Having to learn those things kind of from others by way of example. So same type deal.
And since we're talking about it, there's a guy on the panel here that's actually wrote a book. It's Good to Be a Man that everybody needs to go get. Very helpful. I appreciated that, Mike, for sure. Let me turn this down. I want to go back to paganism a little bit, because I think that every time that I look at a problem, and I want to get you guys' take on this. We were just talking about paganism, the influx of paganism. Jason has been talking about this with me for a while, that when paganism comes, so does violence. And I think we can see it in a host of places around the culture. When we are looking at abortion, what do you think that is? That's Moloch worship right there, clear and cut dry. Don't give your kids to Moloch. Don't let them pass through the fire. That's easy. And I don't think that Christians have been as aware of the paganism. So now we have the other form of paganism. We cut them up to kill them. Now we want to cut them up to remake them in transgender movement, right? So that's another form of paganism. And so it's just, there's violence in the murder. There's violence in the cutting of the body to cut off their body parts, to sacrifice them. And then, the education system. Like we forget government education is not designed to make your children good children for you. It's to make them good slaves for the state.
Yes.
And so we are sending our kids off to pagan worship by sending them to government schools.
Yep.
And to learn that pagan system. They're teaching them. I mean, when you got evolution being taught in the school, I don't know how every Christian is like, yeah, no, we're not doing that.
Yep.
We see it in the way that we look at economics right now. Yep. We are in communism. It's all power. So anyway, you got
the Gaian worship.
Yes,
with the climate change and all of that.
Yes, climate change. Yes.
Yep, it's huge.
So I just kind of want everybody to go around for a minute here, and let's just talk about how do we uproot. And we're talking about culture, this kind of paganistic culture that's come in by storm, and I think even Christians in one way or another are a part of this cosmology. They share it. And so I haven't seen great answers coming from Christians that are, that seem like they're actually going to be effective in the fight. Okay. So I just kind of want to go around. Jason, you want to start and just kind of talk about how in the world do we uproot the paganistic worldview that we're facing in such a way that is actually infectious or
effective.
yes.
Efficacious.
Yeah. Efficacious. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my mind, if you look back at the way the early church, the early medieval church as well, sent missionaries out to the pagans, and how the effectiveness, there were two major ways that that pagans were converted effectively. You had the St. Augustine of Canterbury, who he went in, and you have seven kingdoms with and three tribal groups in England, and he sent out there were two big important things that he realized early on, is that if they're not you're not just converting their mind the way you did with the Greeks. With the Greeks, you converted their mind, and they didn't actually lose that much. It became kind of a new philosophy, but they could keep the rest of their life going. In a tribal setting, to change religions, you lost everything. So they had to. So when he brought the 40 monks and started a monastery that was a tribe that that people could join, so that there was still a way for them to actually get enough food, and they needed the church to act like an extended family, to be able to effectively deal with converts. So that was part of it. Then they sent out poets in mass, because the conversion of tribes was not they didn't he's Saint Boniface, who failed in Germany to convert the tribes. The guy that he followed on after, I mean, he eventually converted them through his martyrdom, but in his ministry he didn't have a very effective ministry. But his blood showed the blood of Christ to the Germans, and they were converted. But the monk that was there before him said, "We've tried all of the philosophical things, and none of them worked, because they don't have the philosophical categories to explain the gospel." And Augustine of Canterbury, with Caedmon and the different poets, said, well, it's because the way to the soul in a tribal people is actually through the gut, right? Through the heart, through the poetry. And so they trained up poets and sent them into the poetry circles, that they so it was through the arts. And then another big part was when a pagan would convert, they would still bring us an animal sacrifice, and instead of and Gregory in a letter explains that he says, well, don't tell them no. If they bring a sacrifice, instead barbecue it and have a fellowship meal, turn it into a potluck, so that they know that their God gives to them and doesn't take from them anymore. Right? Their new God functions differently. So that was a really effective way to convert the pagans. And then the other was Charlemagne. He converted huge swaths of pagans at the tip of a sword. But he brought with them, if they converted, they got education, they got a legal system that functioned. They got all of the things that came along with civilization, and because the church, if culture is, I don't like religion externalized, because that acts like religion is something that's inside of us. But I do think that culture flows out of the covenant foundation that we have with God, and then the liturgy of the Lord, the ways we worship the Lord before him. All of that flows out and changes and brings a people. Charlemagne brought a culture that was just simply better, right? So you lost a war to Charlemagne, and you had the option of die or join. And they looked over and they said, well, it doesn't look too bad over there, right? So, and within 100 years, they were writing of their hero Charlemagne, right? So it only took a couple of generations to not have to survive
hand to mouth, to not have to survive on blood, to not have to survive on rivalry, to not before they started saying, boy, we're sure grateful that Charlemagne insisted that we get baptized. So I mean, I think you've got a couple of different models, but the church historically has figured out how to bring pagans in. We haven't figured out really well how to bring modernists in, materialists in. We've basically failed at that. So in some ways, the repaganization, I think, is good news.
Yeah, I want to jump in here because I've got to run in a sec. But I loved kind of hearing you unpack kind of the historical approach that the church has made toward rooting out paganism. I think all of those things that you mentioned are important lessons for us to learn. They're important. That's an important historical narrative that we need to embrace, adopt, think through, look at. You know, we have the tendency in our current culture to reinvent things as if it's never been tried before, never been done before. It's not been successful, or that maybe it was successful, but this is a new day and time. Not recognizing that we're dealing with the same hearts and minds and and depravity, whether it was historically or currently in our modern culture. I think it's going to require every facet of culture to be infused with people who understand what the mission of the kingdom is, whether it's the arts, whether it's poetry, whether it's cinema, whether it's economics, whether it's politics, whether it's education, you name the area. Believers are going to have to truly be believers in Christ who know and understand their Bible and are absolutely living that out, coming back to the local church to get infused with energy and the excitement that they need to go back out and treat things like they should, recognizing that the world in which they live is the missional place by which we're to go and proclaim gospel and live out gospel and be a light of the gospel, be that which is reflective of the gospel. So all of those pieces of the puzzle are things I think that are imperative that we do. We've got to do it better. We have to think through, understanding that we are indeed a body who has parts. Right? There's a role that each of us are to play that may not look like the other, and we don't have to cannibalize one another in an effort to get to where we're going.
Come on.
Amen. Right? There's a space in place for Chuck Knox and his team and his folks to go do what they do. There's a space for me to go do what I do. I don't have to critique how you're handling what you're handling and whether and if we do, we can do that behind the scenes, but go as a forward army, advancing the cause and sake of Christ. And so I love to see more of that and less of the backbiting and backstabbing and clout chasing or platform growing. Let's grow the platform of Christ, root out paganism, and keep things moving. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what it looks like. And that's been my goal and my role. And I mean, Nas can tell you, man, whether it's out in front or behind the scenes, I'm always looking for those who honor God, love God, have a desire to see his kingdom promoted, to lock arms where we can with other brothers who we may not completely agree with, but we understand we have a mission in mind, and we keep it pushing. So I saw you. I've always wanted to be on the show, man. So this is my fortunate day, but I've got a ton of work I got to get done, and say hey, and let all you guys know. Appreciate all the things that you're doing, and hope to see you at the G3 conference. I'll throw that in.
Okay, that's why you really came on here. Over to the G3 conference. All right, we'll talk to you later.
Right. Thanks for joining us.
Mike, you got the floor.
Sure.
And you're long-winded because you pastors be preaching like, man, come on, cut me half.
I was listening. Sometimes we got a lot to say. So
that's true.
It is true.
I just think the masculinity movement is definitely neo-pagan or pagan, where it's you either have the Gnostic side that denies the value of the body. So that's sort of your transgenderism. And you also have a lot of kind of pietistic assumptions about human existence that leads the evangelicals down that pathway, more of that form of Gnosticism. And then on the flip side, you have man as machine, where through evolutionary psychology, and you hear guys cite this like it's, I feel like people don't understand how new neurology is as a study. The explanation for everything's dopamine, like everything, dopamine, everything. But we still are learning to understand that stuff. But you'll hear people explain everything about what it means to be a man through a sort of evolutionary worldview. And then that really means if it's rewarding, do it, right? Is sort of utilitarianism of sorts that breaks down quickly. So that's the sort of Tate, Red Pill, Rollo Tomasi. If they've got some stupid looking Greek statue and sharing truisms on Twitter, that's the sort of masculinity you're seeing pushed out. The thing is, they're stealing, like they're just noticing God's creational design, right? Like when you actually get immersed in.
But ain't nothing but the devil. Boy, that right there, boy, right when he gets to it, and then he just, that ain't nothing but the devil, Mike. Oh, that's sad. All right. Down goes Foster. Down goes Foster. He's back.
All right.
There we go. You kind of back, Mike. Okay. All right, we're gonna have to do it without Mike. Since Mike is gone, I'm gonna try and jump in here with mine. Jason, the last few things that, we've been talking for a year, and the first thing that I had to come to terms with was my own Gnosticism and paganism. I see it out there in the world, and I'm very, very aware of it because I'm looking at it like that's wrong. And when you start seeing violence, when you see the kids that are disobeying their parents, I was talking to my kids about this, but when you see kids that disobey parents and they're out there destroying the land, they're beating up old folks, you have masculinity itself is anything that's anti-feminism, not that it has its own definition. This is kind of piggybacking off of Foster, but it's just anti-feminism, and that's enough. Yeah. You don't see any justice, then you get pollution. And pollution, that's numbers. You get pollution in so many different ways in your culture. And one of the main reasons you get pollution is because you're not practicing justice. And justice can't always be practiced at a level where I don't have authority. So I have to work where I have authority, complete authority to enact biblical standards. And if those biblical standards are not being enacted in my own home, in my own life, I don't know how in the world I'm going to have any effect on paganism in the culture. Matter of fact, I can tell you won't have any effect on paganism in the culture, because you're not clean yourself. You got to get clean. And so I'm realizing that the things that I need to be doing are very simple and very basic. And if I can't do those well, I don't know. I was just talking to a guy the other day that is trying to get into the music industry and trying to get into the film industry. And he has a hard time fulfilling and doing his own YouTube channel. And I said, man, how are you going to work for somebody else if you don't even have fun and enjoy doing the very thing that you get to create and do on your own channel every day? And if we can't instruct and train and disciple and teach our kids and catechize our children in the word of God and saturate them in the scripture so that we can see what it looks like for us to have a garden after 15 years or 10 years, is your wife maturing and growing in the Lord? Is she want to obey and submit to you more? Is she joyfully in love with you and the message and the mission that you're on, and she supports that and she's growing? If you're not seeing those things in your own home and you're not seeing faithfulness and covenant faithfulness create a culture in your own home, I don't know what you're going to do out here except for make more of a mess. And so, I'm realizing in the last 2 or 3 years, the more focused I am on my own home and being a good, godly husband and father, training his children upright, I look at political stuff and I'm like, I know how to fix that. Right? I know what the problem is here. And before, I wouldn't have had the same sort of response, like, what's going on here? Well, this is what happens when you get out of step with God. This is covenant unfaithfulness. That's all it is.
Right.
And when you start worshiping false idols, and when you figure you don't honor God, and you don't fear the Lord, and you don't keep the Sabbath, and you don't honor your own parents, right? Because you let your own parents jump on welfare, and you let your own parents get into the system, and you're not taking care of them, then you are part of the problem. And so when you, there's an old song that says, "Sweep around your own front door before you try and sweep around mine," right? Like that. But that's where we're really at. And I know those answers aren't big and sexy, and everybody doesn't want to jump on that. But man, could you imagine if just every individual start taking responsibility for themselves before the Lord? And then when you do that, you see your neighbor out of line, and you're like, "Hey, man, yo, don't you be Achan, don't you be bringing the curses of God up here against us? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know what to do." Well, then let me teach you. Let me work with you. Let me disciple you into the ways of the Lord. And so I know everybody wants some like big, grandiose, sort of thing to do, the big thing. But this is like Naaman. Just go dunk yourself like the prophet told you 7 times in the Jordan in the dirty water. That's what you need to go do. Go do the things that you don't want to do that is really simple to do. Wake up. Fear the Lord. Love your wife. Train your children. Do your kids know scripture? Matter of fact, when you run into a problem in your life, when you run into a situation that you're dealing with, is scripture the first thing that comes to your mind, or are you trying to figure out another answer from somewhere else? Well, that's your problem, right? If you don't have answers from the scripture, then you don't have wisdom. So, okay, Mike's back. He's probably tired of hearing me talk. Mike, you got the last one.
Sorry, I was on my cell phone and someone called me and killed me. So I'm back now. But well, I don't know how to top that. You're getting all strong there. It was a beautiful thing. I do think it's in terms of to sum up what I think's happening is that we've lost the breakdown of the family has caused a loss of cultural identity, tradition, of your place in the world, all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Now people are trying to find that somewhere. That's why, that's why people think of Comic-Con, like the depth that people go into fandom now, like is pretty wild, right? Like there's always been something like that, but now like people are defined by their TV shows, their movies, their comics, that maybe the sort of games they play, or even some of the LARPing that they do. That I don't mean that in a sarcastic way, but actually going out to do live action role play and all that stuff. These people are looking for an identity, a tradition, and you get that from your mom and dad raising you up in the Lord. And if we've lost that, we got to rebuild it, and it starts with you. That's why when we wrote "It's Good to Be a Man," I'm not trying to sell it. It's free on Kindle Unlimited.
Go sell it. People need to buy it.
But that's why we really started with the individual man. Like, if you can't rule and reign over yourself, you're not going to rule and reign over anyone else. And it starts with you taking responsibility. And the way you can do that is being brought to your knees before God through his law and wanting to be reconciled to him. Then you're not a bastard anymore, right? You're not fatherless. You have God as father. And when you have God as father, you don't have the same need for the validation of other kind of these online gurus or, overreaching pastors or even like a woman or whatever. You have God's, I always think about the benediction in number 6, like God's face shines upon me. He smiles on me. God loves me, right? I'm in Christ. I have his approval. I don't need to worry about this stuff. I don't need to, I perform out of gratitude, not out of trying to prove myself. I remember seeing on the wall, the gym I used to work out in, that it's something that you lift to build strength, not to demonstrate it. Right. So when you're in the gym, you're building strength, and really guys need to be out there gaining skills and abilities and character, and not out there kind of showboating online, which is really easy to fake, that you have it figured out. But we need people just doing things in the real world. Someone asked me how to get involved in politically. And I was like, man, don't go big first. Get involved in your chamber of commerce or your local swim club or something. Get to know people, get to be invested. Let people know and care about what you're into. Just take little small steps of faithfulness and watch how God blesses that. And so but the first thing is repent, believe the gospel, get your spiritual disciplines. Well, go into a church, Go to a church. If you have to choose between daily Bible reading and going to a church on Sunday, I'll offend everybody. Go to church on Sunday. Now that's a false dichotomy, but public worship is so central to who we are. God has made us to have a liturgical existence. So just get back into church, start reading the Bible systematically, pray through the Lord's Prayer, right? Adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication, and then start reading some of the great books. Work your way through the confession. Watch how God changes your entire life. I love G.I. Williamson's commentary on the Shorter Catechism.
Yes.
Confession people do that, but the Shorter Catechism is better because it's like 2 to 3 pages on each question. And anyone can do that a day, 2 to 3 pages. You can read it as a family, you can learn, and then watch how God stabilizes you. But what I think some of the younger people don't know, as annoying as some boomers are, some of them are where they're at because of 40 years of hard work, right? So if you want to like get some momentum in life, it takes decades, not just months, not just years. And everything's so half-baked quick these days. People think there are no shortcuts, right? Shortcuts lead to detours. And so just doing the actual hard work right now will make so much difference in the long run, and all the hot stuff will fade away. You know, it will.
You just triggered me, bro. When you talked about, I haven't said this publicly. I'll go ahead and say it. And I have a little bit of a moment. Maybe I'm about to have a boomer moment, because when you said that, all I can think, this is why what you said is so important. If you know your catechism, if you know your confession, this is going to make sense to you. I have absolutely been annoyed at the boomer, anti-boomer culture that's developed. Oh, boomers, they're so annoying. I don't know. And I get it. I get what they're saying. Every generation always has the older generation that kind of gets at them and say, what's wrong with you, boy? What you doing? And this is why some of this is the breakdown of culture, because there used to be a fifth commandment violation that rested in everybody's mind and heart, that when your old folks spoke, you shut your mouth and you listened to them. And there was no distaste for it, like, oh, you might not like it. You didn't roll your eyes. You sat there and listened to them, and you might walk away. But then there was always a part of you that was like, because you were taught that, you walked away and said, man, I think he's right. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think he might be onto something. But now we're so dismissive of our elders that, hey, and we want to discredit them by throwing like tags like boomer. It's like, hold on, man. You respect your elders. You respect the people who came before you, the people who have even lived life more than you have. They've seen some things, right? They've seen that 40-year cycle go over. So when somebody speaks and said, man, you listen to them. And I'd be doggone. I wish my kids would act like that, boy. It'd be like your friend's mom, be like, take your clothes off. You're getting one right now. You know what I mean? It's just, and this goes even to the problem we were talking about last time with the wokeness in the movies and the wokeness in the culture. And we were talking about Ninja Turtles and my problem with Ninja Turtles. And the problem with Snow White, it's not the woke stuff that's bothering me. Like, and what I mean by woke, something like, oh, this person's black, or the little mermaid's black. It's not that. There's something bigger going on, which is they're trying to disconnect you from your parents. The Ninja Turtles, me and my son, if we went and watched the Ninja Turtles and I say, oh, you remember the Ninja Turtle who likes April a lot? He's like, oh, yeah, Leonardo. I'm like, no. It's Michelangelo.
Yeah.
He's the one who really liked her. No, it's Leonardo. And then we said, well, you remember what April looked like, right? Yeah, April, the white girl with the red. No. Black girl, heavyset. Like, what? It's not just that they're changing the narratives. They're trying to disconnect parents from their kids. Snow White, the whole thing, like she's, the girl out there, what's it, Rachel Zegler or whatever?
Super unpleasant, man. She's like, what's that, Brie Larson on steroids? I mean, it's like one of the most unlikable people in a long time.
But she's the representative of what they're trying to do with wokeness is separate covenantal realities between generations. I get to pass down to my kids cartoons that help make me with virtue. Here's something that helped build virtue in your father. Let me hand this down to you. Let me make sure that you can embrace this too. So you have the same virtues as I have. But when we can't hand down our stories or our mythos to our children because they're all disconnected and don't have the same virtues, then they win. They win the baton pass. And now they have the kids and can teach them the virtues they want them to have instead of us being able to pass down the virtues that we developed to them. And so Fifth Commandment violations and the way that we're treating boomers and stuff like that, it's just driving me nuts. And it's like, y'all need to chill out. Shut your mouth. You ain't lived long enough to raise a candle to that dude. Respect him, have your position, but learn how to respect him and really listen to what he's trying to say before you dismiss him as a boomer, you know? And believe it or not, it will go well with you to glean that from him. And I just think there's a lack of respect for our elders that is intentionally there to make sure we don't pass down information.
Wrote an article about this morning and put it on my website. Actually, I agree. I think boomers a mindset more than actually a age. I wouldn't want to, and I know a lot of people. I think Doug's exceptional in this area, and some other men I know. The flip side I'd say is there's nothing. The worst type of fool is the old fool, and
Sure.
And then a generation arose that didn't know the Lord in Judges. And what I would say to this group, let's say the boomers are as bad as you say they are. What are you doing differently? Being full of bitterness and pointing the finger at them. Is this the pathway to correcting mistakes? Is this the pathway, like talking about how blaming them for all your problems? And so each person has to at some point take responsibility for their own life. And what bothers me about trends I see in both kind of generational groups is an unwillingness to take responsibility for your own sins, your own failure. But also, like people say, "Okay, boomer" to me. I just laugh at them, But they're like you say a whole lot of stuff. You make evidence-based arguments and point them to scripture. And their response is, "Okay, boomer."
Well, and that's part of it too. It's hard to mature as an adult if you can't honor the people who are before you. My dad was a horrible man, okay? But he was a horrible man and not a great father. And yet I'm called to honor him. And I do. And me and my father, while we might disagree with things, and God has washed him of his sins and cleansed him, and I'm sure he's asked for forgiveness in a lot of ways, I still am required to honor my father, and I want to make sure that I honor him in such a way that my children see the sins of their grandfather and watch me honor him. And so when they see my sins, where I'm going to come up short as a father, they have the right type of position in order to bring me back to righteousness in an honorable way. And I don't see the honor bestowed even on the elders that might be a little off. I mean, but even, the elders that are the real boomers that come way before us, 2 generations or a generation before us, they still are saturated in a certain type of Christian culture. Don't get me wrong. I know that culture gave us what we got right now, but they're still saturated enough Christian culture that has wisdom to it that we probably need to observe a little bit, because we're in the Wild Wild West right now. There's no rules. Nobody's playing by any rules.
It's going to catch up. My dad wasn't a good man either in a lot of ways. He loved me, but I forgave him for all that stuff a long time ago. He feels really bad about where he failed us. And I said, "Look, Dad, it's easy to forgive you, in part because of what Jesus has done for me. Another part of it is that I know I'm going to fail your grandsons, and someday I'll have to ask them for forgiveness as well." And in that humility, you don't hear, like, I'll make a principled critique of generational problems, but I'm not going to, that's a generational broad critique that I don't think is individualized in every person that was born in those times.
Sure.
And it's also not from a place of anger or hatred or whatever. And looking at, like, Gen X's own sort of ambivalence. You're like, that's why we're kind of like the unlikely heroic generation. We've just been off to the side doing our own thing and like staying out of it. And then suddenly like, oh man, it's got so crazy. I guess I should probably get involved in this, So
maybe you have to quit being ironic.
Yeah. We were the whatever, lazy. We were so, man, like we didn't know how rich we were in the 90s, right?
That's right.
Like 90s was crazy. It was the height of like having 4 or 5, like you have to choose, like, are you going to watch Fresh Prince or are you going to watch this? And if you miss that episode, you don't get to see it again to summer, man. Right? You got to wait the whole summer. Right? If you went to the movies and on the trailers, that's the first time you found out that movie. I remember going and seeing the trailer for Phantom Menace and my brain like blowing up. Like, there's another Star Wars. Like, I didn't know that. We would go away for the whole day. My mom and dad didn't call me because there was no cell phones.
That's right.
And play and have fun. And there was very few wars. There were almost no wars. Like, there was the Persian Gulf. That's a joke, right? And so we had everything pretty easy. Started getting weird with Columbine on, but in 9/11, obviously. But that we lived in this really idyllic, nice time. Actually, we were very blessed. I'm thankful. Culture was the culture was kind of monocultural at the time, and that's the start of the breakdown. Is mid to late 90s. Anyway, so I think our generation was privileged in that sense, in that meaning of it, and we just kind of like have watched the millennials and boomers tear at each other and just kind of stayed out, you know? Yeah. And I see it as sort of an apathy in our culture. But now, like, as people that kind of grew up in the middle, we're starting to, so my whole point here is not, I don't want to go too long. My point is that each generation has its strengths, its weaknesses, its sets of sins, its moments that it gets to stand up to. You know, sometimes you're going to fight, you're Athanasius and fighting for the person of Christ. Sometimes you're Machen fighting against liberalism. Sometimes you're Augustine fighting against Pelagius or whatever. And we have our fight. So the question is, okay, let's say your father's failed you. How are you in the fight right now? And I think as you get in the fight, you'll start to become more sympathetic to those that came before you and screwed it up, because you'll start finding out, you know what, this is really hard. Mike Tyson said it right. Everyone has a plan till they get punched in their mouth. And everyone knows how to fix culture and do everything and do church right. And then they get out there and try to do it. And then it turns out this stuff is hard. This is complicated.
Yeah. Jason, last word.
Well, maybe just bring it back to paganism one more time. I do think that there is an inherent rivalry between generations in paganism, and that that's something that as Christians we need to resist whenever we see a rivalry grow up between generations. We say, oh no, that's not the way we do things. We show honor up, we show love down. We don't play that game. You know, Sophocles isn't right that either the dad or the son has to die for peace to be established, right? So and this is one of the reasons that I really like, you know, we started talking about Spencer a little bit, because Edmund Spencer talks about having children is the way that within that we get to be a part of God overcoming death generation after generation after generation. Death doesn't win because we had kids, and that we get to be a part of that, and that seeing that as God's work, you know, the establishing of each generation, the birth of new children, the birth of all of that is God's work at refusing to let death win, and then, you know, is, I think, something that needs to really be restored within the church, that that kids are a blessing, and that parents are a blessing, that grandparents are a blessing, right? That all those rivalries that we just say, nope, don't play that game. Parents are a blessing, grandparents are a blessing. Even a bad dad was God overcoming death in the world, and I'm the evidence of it. Here I am. Look at that. Death didn't win again. Take that, Satan. That just refusing to play into the rivalry between generations, I think, is just really at the heart of resisting paganism.
That's it. All right, y'all. This was a nice try. Next time we do this on the Spaces, we're on Spaces, we're on Twitter, or it's actually X now, and then we're on YouTube, and I forgot Rumble. That's on me. But next time I'm going to have the Spaces thing fixed so we can hear all the comments and people can stay on Spaces and talk there. All right. Hey, Mike, thanks for hanging out with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, y'all.
All right.